Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So I wanted to ask you just to give us a little insight about who you are and what you're all about.
I fell in love with sports as a kid. Like I fell in love on the soccer field. When I was young, my parents put me in soccer and softball. I danced as well. I don't think I ever played volleyball, which is a regret, but they put me in a ton of sports. I just really fell in love with soccer. And I had a really good friend growing up, and she was the youngest of five siblings, and all her siblings played soccer. And so like our life as a kid was like playing in the backyard, playing against all her siblings, playing in the hallway. Like I don't know how or why it happened, but I was just always so drawn to soccer, and that just grew as I went deeper in space and went from playing rec league to club to more seriously with youth national teams and stuff like that, and just went deeper and deeper into the soccer world.
So at what point were you like, I think I'm gonna go pro?
I think when I was like 7, like I really like fell in love and was just like, I want to do this and I want to be awesome at it. And like really, as like a really young kid with no understanding, I think when I was like 7, there was no professional women's soccer in the US. So like this was totally like just falling in love with the game, learning more about like the 99 World Cup team, learning more about Mia Hamm, Brandi Chastain, all of those players, and just like wanting to do that and wanting to play on the big stage and represent the US. And like it was always, always a dream to play in college and play professionally.
I feel like a lot of people don't understand the process in getting to that level from starting out maybe in high school and to working your way up. Can you kind of like give us a gist on how that works?
Yeah. Like going deep in sports.
Going deep in sports.
I think like a lot of people would tell me, and you hear this all the time, there's only, what is it, like 2% of athletes play collegiately, and then it's like 2% of that group play professionally. So like it's really hard and it's a ton of work, but it's also, I think, doable. Like if people want to put their heart and soul and are willing to commit the time, because it's a lot of, hey, you got to have some natural ability, you got to be able to move and be an athlete, but then it's reps and it's working on stuff, and you're not born knowing how to kick a soccer ball like just right away. Like you learn these things, you practice the thing, you get the reps in, you put the time in. And I think anyone that's willing to do that can really, really go far. But it is just a willingness. It's a willingness to do the work, I think.
So how many years did you play professionally?
So I actually didn't have a great professional career, also didn't have a great collegiate career. And maybe this is where some of my like current sort of mindset is on all this. I had a ton of injuries in college. I had 4 season-ending injuries, and then injuries sort of plagued me professionally as well, which for me, I think really derailed my professional career. And I mean, you didn't ask this, but I think a huge reason for that was I was I was a grinder. Like I've always been willing to put in the work, and I overtrained. And I think even, when you're so dedicated and so in love with something and want to take it as far as you can, balance is so key and recovery is so key. And, that's a lesson like that I learned the hard way in soccer and, derailed that career, but I very much try and apply to what I'm doing now.
So when you were playing and you're finally kind of at that moment that you want to retire, were you thinking of starting a business, or where did the idea come into play?
No, I was devastated. Like I really got forced into an early retirement because of injuries. I just really couldn't get myself going. I was in a lot of pain. So I ended up having hip surgery, and I'm actually feeling a lot better now than I did when I was playing. But no, I was lost. Like I had put everything into soccer, and it was really, really devastating when it didn't go the way I wanted it to go. And yeah, it was like my whole heart, my whole soul, my whole energy was in that sport. And so when it ended, that's the most lost I think I've ever been in my life. Like I didn't know who I was, what I wanted to do, or how to spend my time. And I think fortunately for me, when I was at Stanford, I did a master's program in communication, and I got close with the professor in that program, Professor Jeremy Bailenson, which he's really on the forefront of virtual reality technology. And he had started a company called Striver that was doing virtual reality training for athletes at the time. But for me, like, I thought that was really cool. And it kind of timed up that when soccer was ending, they had just raised a round of funding and we're looking for people to join. And I thought it was a really cool company, really cool concept, really cool opportunity. So I kind of dove into that
Yeah.
and kind of thought at the time that I didn't know what I thought. I was lost, but I thought sports were behind me. I thought I was, quote unquote, grown up now and, just gonna have my job and do my thing. And pretty quickly I was unhappy and I missed sports and I missed the ownership of like, really owning your success and your wins or wins for, in sports, it's like you break through and you hit a new level of fitness or something like that, like you feel that on the field, like you're so in control of your destiny and your fate. And I think that I missed that sort of level of ownership in my life. Um, yeah. And while I was at Striver, I was a huge, I thought I was done with sports, but I was such a huge fan. And I had friends that were still playing or coaches I was close to. And so I still cared a lot about women's sports. And in particular, was really trying to follow women's soccer. And I just like really couldn't do it. And, we now know it's 3-4% of sports coverage is dedicated to women's sports. But on the other side, because I was super active about seeking out this content and, trying to figure what was really going on in the NWSL and WNBA and all the women's sports leagues, like I was seeing content that didn't feel like the world that I knew. It felt very young. It felt hyper feminine. It was all lifestyle content. And I just was like, where are the sports? Where are the highlights and the stats? And who's at the top of the, like,
Yeah.
where are the sports? And that's really how Just Women's Sports started. We are literally what our name says, Just Women's Sports. And so, that kind of need and want and seeing that sort of gap in the market and the sports ecosystem, I just kind of dove in.
And for those who don't know, what does Just Women's Sports do? Because it's so important, your company, for those. So what do you guys do there?
Yeah, so Just Women's Sports, like literally what I said, we're exactly what our name
Yeah.
says. We cover Just Women's Sports. We're a digital media company. We exist on social, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. We have a newsletter, website, some video series, some podcast series. Really our goal and our vision is to be the one-stop shop for all things women's sports. So what ESPN does on the men's side, if you really think of them when you think of sports and you think of them for your sports content, that's what we want to be in women's sports.
It's amazing and such a needed thing. I feel like I watch ESPN all the time and I never see coverage of women's sports. And I am looking for that and to see that. And I think if our eyes were open to it, more people would be drawn in to watch. And I wanted to ask you, what do you feel is why we're not getting coverage?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it really comes from like an evil place. Like, I think that, you know, legacy media started at a time when women's sports weren't really a thing. So they're built and optimized for men's sports. If you look at mainstream media companies, they're leading with NFL, NBA, MLB, all the major men's sports leagues. And then they're building audiences that want those leagues and bringing in sponsors that want to sponsor against those leagues. So just the whole thing is set up for men's sports. And it makes sense to me that women's sports, doesn't really work on those networks. But what we're seeing is, in the 70s, Title IX passed, right? And since that time, there's been a massive increase in participation of girls and women's sports, right? It's like over 1,000% increase at the high school level, 600% increase at the collegiate level, and something similar at the pro level. And basically, for the first time ever, we have gender parity in participation. That has led to massive increases in viewership and attendance. And with very minimal investment and coverage, women's sports is starting to rival men's sports and at times beat them. The Women's College World Series the last 2 years has outdrawn the men's. The women's NCAA final for volleyball has outdrawn the men. NWSL has seen 500% increases year over year in viewership. Like, the numbers are all building, but nothing in the media environment and the sports media environment is set up to really, fuel that or drive that or really cover that. And so, that's why we exist. It's really a new opportunity. There's a whole new demographic of people out there that want women's sports, and, we're here to serve them.
So for your people who do want women's sports, how are you making it accessible for them to find these sports?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, for us, it's just about existing and covering it like women's sports. Like, if you go to our website, we have a scoreboard at the top of our website. It's the first ever women's sports scoreboard where you can see live sports in real time from all the major leagues. We have all the news, all the information. We say our website is, the homepage of women's sports. Like, you want to know game recaps, or someone got traded, someone got injured, what the score was of that game. Like, we have it. It doesn't exist anywhere else, but we have it,
Yeah.
And same with our social feeds. And then, I think on some other channels, for example, with our podcast or video series, we get the chance to go a little deeper. But really, it's just about existing in a lot of ways, and being high quality, and, serving the space the way it deserves to, but just in so many ways, just covering women's sports for what it is, because it's dope and people want it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, what is your role as CEO?
It's a really good question because it's changed so many times. My role early days when I was starting Just Women's Sports is I did a lot of the content creation. I used to run our social media channels. I used to write our newsletter. I used to write articles on our website. I produced our first couple podcasts. Like, I was a content creator, which is a little bit weird because I'm not a content creator. That's not my background. I did operations and marketing before that, but just dove in and kind of followed my intuition on a lot of that. Then as we leveled up and we went from, 0 to 4 people and like 4 to 15 people, like, I had to really learn how to start managing and delegating. And, 15 people is still not enough to, really operate a full-fledged media company. So I still had a lot of work to do, very involved in sales and marketing and talent relations and stuff like that, but more managing. And we're entering this new phase where we're currently 25 people. By the end of the year, we think we'll be, coming up on 40, maybe more. Like, that's a whole new job, because now it's like you're managing managers. And so it's like figuring out how to scale yourself and, where to dedicate your time, and when to force yourself to pull out of the weeds. Like, I feel like my job is constantly changing, and some things come to me more naturally than others. But I mean, kind of going back to sports, it's like sports. Like, you got to, figure out what you're good at, work on what you're not good at, figure out how to optimize your days, build in recovery, all of that.
Yeah. And as a woman CEO, do you have any advice for other women who are trying to break into the business world?
Yeah. I always say this, and it sounds simple, but like, I like really mean this. It's like, just go for it. Like, it is, yeah, just go for it. Like, they're honestly diving into Just Women's Sports. Like, I really just dove in, and like, so much good has happened, and I've made so many mistakes, and I've stumbled along the way for sure, but I've also learned and improved, and we've done a lot of stuff really, really well. And I think it's just go for it. Like, a willingness to learn on the job, make mistakes, see where you can get better. Like, I think that's like something that's really hard to do, but really important.
And what are you looking for those who are interested in hiring?
Yeah, I mean, I think every role is different. And right now we're in a phase where like we really need people that can come in and like sort of immediately add a certain skill set, just to the phase that we're at as a company. But I'll say, like, we are so big on our values, and like, we are really, really big believers in like hustle and heart and teamwork. And there is just something you can see with people of like, are they going to dive in with 2 feet, put their heart in, roll up their sleeves, be willing to be on a team, be willing to go that extra mile. And like, as I'm saying this, I can hear like how cliche this all sounds, but like, but like, we talk about this all the time. We have a lot of former athletes on the Just Women's Sports team. And we all like really agree that like we've been on amazingly talented teams that have underperformed, and like mediocre talent, level teams that have amazing chemistry that will always outperform. And so like, we are such believers in chemistry. And it doesn't mean like, oh, come here and be like everyone else, but it does mean come here and like add to the chemistry, add to the vibes, be a team player. And be a team player doesn't mean don't look out for yourself. Like, don't be ambitious. Like, it means that, but working together, I just can't emphasize how much we really, really believe in that. And we have let candidates go that we don't think will, like, be down with what we're doing and trying to build.
Lastly, I wanted to ask you if you could have a piece of advice for a high school or college version of yourself, what would you tell her today?
What's coming to mind for me is like take up space. And maybe it goes back to what you're saying about like, sort of female founders and stuff like that. Like, I don't know if it's a being young thing or a female thing or just a personality trait that maybe some people have, but like there was a long period of time where like, I wanted people to like me and I wanted to know like where my place was. And like I didn't want to be outside the rules or the norm. Yeah. If that makes sense. But like I always kind of was. And I feel like that was uncomfortable for me for a long time. And I felt like, why can't I just blend in? Like, what's my problem?
That.
You know,
Yeah,
and yeah, and I feel like it's like when you're young, it's hard to just be like, no, like this is me, and like I'm gonna make mistakes, but like I'm gonna follow my intuition and my heart, and like just like fully like lean into yourself, and like that's why I always say like go for it, because it's like I think sometimes we write rules for ourselves of like, oh, I can't do this, I can't be that, I can't go there, and it's like, but why not?
Mhm.
Yeah,
no,
why not?
I feel like a lot of people have a ton of limiting beliefs, and once they get past them, it's only sky's the limit.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's really hard. Like I still,
yeah.
yeah, and like there's a lot of rules, like quote unquote rules I wrote for myself that I've broken now, but I noticed like I'm always writing rules for myself. And so it's like I'm always trying to be like, no, no, like, keep going, keep trying. So yeah, I think it's like take up space and go for it.
I love that. I thank you so much for joining us and See You Uncovered, and your inspiring story of starting out in soccer and to now being a CEO